What you are about to hear is the story of Marco and Isabella, two lovers from opposite worlds in 18th century Venice. In a city of secrets and shadows, they risk everything for a forbidden love that will change their lives forever. Venice shimmered under the warm glow of lanterns as evening settled over the city. The canals reflected the golden light, creating a dreamlike atmosphere where secrets seemed to whisper in the night air. It was here, on one of these quiet canals, that Marco, a humble gondolier, first locked eyes with Isabella, the daughter of a powerful noble family. Isabella had slipped away from a lavish masquerade, feeling stifled by her life of duty and opulence. She had grown tired of the endless talk of arranged marriages and political alliances, and tonight she sought solitude and freedom. As she wandered the narrow streets, her heart led her to the canals, where she waved down the lone gondolier she saw Marco. With an effortless grace, Marco guided his gondola through the dark, narrow canals. He'd grown up in the city's shadows, a man of simplicity and hard work. When Isabella stepped into his gondola, her beauty and elegance took his breath away. She was a vision, her mask half lowered, her eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of sadness. As he guided the gondola along the canal, they spoke in hushed voices, sharing dreams and stories. Isabella found herself drawn to Marco's honesty and humility, qualities so rare in her world of excess. And Marco, captivated by her spirit, felt a connection unlike anything he'd ever known. By the time the gondola glided back under the glow of lanterns, their fate was sealed. They knew they would meet again. As Isabella stepped onto the pier, she turned back to Marco, her gaze lingering. She whispered, "Tomorrow at sunset," before disappearing into the shadows. In that moment, Marco felt a dangerous spark ignite within him, a forbidden passion that he knew could bring ruin to them both. As the sun dipped below the horizon each evening, Marco and Isabella met in secret, navigating Venice's winding canals under the cover of night. Each encounter on Marco's gondola brought them closer, their conversations filled with laughter, longing glances, and the unspoken desire that had taken root between them. Venice became their haven, its narrow alleys and quiet waters hiding their forbidden love from the world. But with each stolen moment, the risks grew. Isabella's family had arranged her marriage to Lorenzo, a wealthy and influential nobleman whose ambition knew no bounds. The union was meant to strengthen her family's political ties, and Isabella's heart sank each time her mother reminded her of the duty she owed to her name. She knew that her meetings with Marco were not just dangerous, they were an outright betrayal of everything her family had planned for her. One night, as they floated beneath the stars, Isabella confided her fears to Marco. "I am trapped," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They want me to marry a man I do not love, a man who only sees me as another asset to his wealth." Marco took her hands, his dark eyes intense. "Run away with me, Isabella," he said, his voice filled with desperation. "We can leave Venice behind, start a new life far from here." For a brief, blissful moment, Isabella allowed herself to imagine a life with Marco, free from the chains of her family's expectations. But the thought of leaving everything behind terrified her. "Marco, they will never let us go," she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. "If they find out about us, they will destroy you." Yet their love only deepened with each passing day. They continued to meet, knowing that the stakes were higher than ever. And then, just as they began to plan their escape, a shadow appeared in their lives. Lorenzo, suspicious of Isabella's absences and her growing distance, began to follow her. He had seen her leave the family palazzo at dusk, slipping into the night, and his jealousy festered as he watched her walk toward the canals. One evening, Lorenzo followed Isabella to Marco's gondola, staying hidden in the shadows as he observed their embrace, the way Marco held her with a tenderness that was foreign to him. Fury coursed through him, and he vowed to end their love once and for all. Oblivious to the threat looming over them, Marco and Isabella made plans to escape Venice together. They would leave at dawn, taking only what they needed. But as they parted that night, an unease settled over Isabella, a sense that their love was hurtling toward a dangerous crossroads. The morning of their planned escape, Venice was cloaked in an eerie stillness. Marco waited by the docks, his heart racing with both excitement and fear. He clutched the small bag he'd packed, his thoughts consumed by visions of a future with Isabella, far from the restrictions of Venetian society. But as dawn broke, footsteps echoed in the mist, and Marco's heart sank not with joy but with dread. Emerging from the fog was Lorenzo, flanked by two guards. His expression was cold, a dangerous glint in his eyes as he approached Marco. "You think you can steal what is mine?" Lorenzo spat, his voice low but filled with venom. "Did you really believe you could take her from me?" Marco, though outnumbered and unarmed, held his ground. "Isabella is not yours to possess," he said, his voice steady despite the fear pulsing through him. "She deserves to live freely, to be with someone who loves her." Lorenzo's anger flared, and with a quick, vicious command, his guards seized Marco, restraining him as he struggled against their grip. "You will pay for your insolence, gondolier," Lorenzo sneered, his eyes flashing with jealousy and pride. "Isabella will be reminded of her duty, and you will disappear." Meanwhile, back at the palazzo, Isabella was preparing to slip away when she heard the commotion outside. Rushing to the balcony, she looked down in horror as she saw Marco, bound and beaten, being dragged away by Lorenzo's men. Her heart shattered as she realized Lorenzo had discovered their secret. Desperate, she ran through the streets to the harbor, calling out Marco's name. But by the time she reached the docks, Marco was gone, imprisoned, or worse, taken somewhere she could never find him. In her desperation, she turned to Lorenzo, who waited with a smug smile, his arms crossed. "Please, Lorenzo," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Let him go. I'll marry you. I'll do whatever you wish, just don't harm him." Lorenzo's face softened, but only slightly. "The choice was always yours, Isabella. Marry me, and he will be spared. Refuse, and you'll never see him again." Left with no other option, Isabella agreed, her heart breaking as she sacrificed her love to save Marco's life. The wedding was a somber affair, and though the city celebrated, Isabella's spirit was hollow. She lived each day as if in a trance, haunted by memories of Marco and their stolen moments on the gondola. Years passed, and Isabella remained trapped in a life that felt like a cage. But every evening, she would return to the canals, watching the gondolas drift by, hoping that one day she might catch a glimpse of Marco, a fleeting shadow in the water, a reminder of the love she'd lost. Unknown to her, Marco had survived. Freed from prison, he'd left Venice to start a new life, carrying with him only the memories of their love. He'd made peace with his loss, but a part of him would forever remain on those canals, in the mist and quiet waters where their love had bloomed. And so, the love between Marco and Isabella became a legend whispered by gondoliers across Venice, a tale of passion, sacrifice, and the bittersweet memory of a love that defied the boundaries of their world. Though they were forced apart, their story lived on in the heart of the city, carried through the years by the murmur of the canals and the soft glow of the lanterns, a testament to a love that had been as eternal as Venice itself.